Hi, Buckeye fans. Dave Biddle, Patrick Murphy here from Bucknuts and 24/7 Sports. After Ryan Day's press conference today here on Monday, just 3 days away from the season opener at Minnesota on Thursday, also had a chance to talk to a few of the players like Nick Petit-Ferrer, Taraja Mitchell, Jeremy Ruckert, and who am I leaving out? Zach Harrison. How can I forget about Zach Harrison? Let's start with Ryan Day's comments. A lot to get into. I asked him about what the plan is for the number 2 quarterback. First of all, he doesn't know who the backup is yet. Maybe he knows, but he's not telling us. I asked him, well, what's the plan? Would the backup quarterback only go in the game if CJ Stroud got hurt, or maybe if it was a blowout, the game was in hand, or would you want to get him in the game at some point, 3rd or 4th series, just to kind of get his feet wet, make sure that way if CJ did get hurt later and the game's still on the line, that quarterback, let's say it's Kyle McCord, would get some game experience. He said, no, that's not the plan. So there's not going to be a quarterback. The backup quarterback's not going to come in 3rd or 4th series. No surprise there, but I don't think he'd been asked that. So I was curious to get his take on that.
Yeah, I think if the competition probably had gone a little bit differently, if things had stayed closer than they probably have been here recently, maybe we do see some of that. I think they're just very confident in CJ Stroud. And you're right, and I think it was a valid question that, if one of these guys does have to come in because of something, they have less experience than he does. I think it was a valid question. But I also think they need to get CJ Stroud real game reps. And obviously you're doing it in games that matter now. You wish you would have had more time last year. But this is their guy. It sounds like they're going to roll with him. And if we see one of those other guys, it's either a really good thing because they're up very big, or it's a bad thing because CJ Stroud's gotten hurt. So I imagine that, if all goes to plan, you see CJ Stroud play much of this game and much of the games going forward, unless Ohio State gets up big.
Yeah, and looking at running back, there's no doubt that Master T is going to play a big role. I think Mayan Williams is going to play a big role, and Travion Henderson. I think all 3 of those, and they like Marcus Crowley too, but I think all 3 of those guys are going to play a lot in whatever order: Teague, Williams, and Henderson. And Henderson's the home run hitter of that group, the highest ceiling of that group, but they like all 3 of those guys. Again, they like Crowley. They like Evan Pryor too. It's the best depth they've had at running back, quality depth that they've had in a long time. They've had some really good running backs here, but they were, Ryan Day's first year here, they had J.K. Dobbins, and it was like, and Master Teague had a decent year, as a redshirt freshman, but they didn't have too much depth there. They love their depth there now. And it's not just they have depth. They've got guys they really like at the top of that depth chart. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens on Thursday. It doesn't mean whatever happens Thursday is going to be what we see the rest of the season. We saw what happened last year, Patrick, where early on it was Master Teague's job for the most part. They would mix in Trey Sermon. By the end of the season, it was Trey Sermon's job, period. But I'm curious to see how this is going to work out Thursday and the rest of the season.
Yeah, you and I've talked about it a lot. I've talked to other people about it a lot. It's not going to surprise me if Master Teague is the guy who gets that first carry, maybe that first drive. But I do think, like you said, you're going to see some of these other guys. They really like Mayan Williams. They like Marcus Crowley. Travion Henderson has generated a lot of buzz as a true freshman. And even Ryan Day said today, he's going to get in there, but it may just be some of the more experienced guys in a big game. The worst case scenario would be going out there, you already have a young quarterback, then you put a young running back next to him. You have a snap that goes wrong or a poor exchange, and now Minnesota gets the ball in plus territory. Now you're down, So they just want to avoid in a Big Ten game, any sort of mistake early on. Obviously, you don't want that to happen at all, but you certainly don't want to compound things and make things worse. I've heard a lot of good things. I'm sure you have too about Travion Henderson. I had somebody tell me just this past weekend that I talked to that has seen some of the stuff out here that he's ahead of what J.K. Dobbins looks like heading into that freshman year. So, that's pretty high praise. It's one person's opinion, but it's someone I trust. And, I think that's going to be a really exciting thing. I just do think when you have this luxury of older guys you trust in games, you're going to give them the first carries, let them kind of get everything set up. And once you bring the young guy in, he probably runs with it to some degree.
Pun intended.
Yeah.
This offense is going to be elite. Let's talk about the offensive line. I think for the first game, at least, they're going to rotate a little bit because Thayer Mumford is going to play. Sounds like he's going to start at left guard. But he's been a little banged up. And furthermore, Matt Jones is playing really well. I feel like they almost have 6 starters in there. So I think Thayer Mumford is going to get the start at left guard, which has been the plan pretty much all of camp. But he's had to miss some practices here and there. And Matt Jones has played really well when he's been with the first team. And we saw Matt Jones – his 3 starts last year, he performed well. Yeah. So I look for, in the Minnesota game, for Thayer Mumford to start, but Matt Jones would be mixed in there a little bit. But I love this O-line with Petit-Ferrer, left tackle. Those two guys I just mentioned at left guard, Harry Miller at center. Luke Whippler can also play center. They like him as the backup. Paris Johnson Jr. is going to have a monster year at right guard. And then speaking of monster, DeJuan Jones at right tackle. I mean, it's great having him out there, big Thanos. But yeah, I think we might see a little bit of rotation at left guard there in the first game.
Yeah, I think they like what they've got. Nicholas Petit-Frere was telling us just a little while ago that, while there's always this narrative that you need chemistry with an offensive line, they feel like they've got 6-7 guys that all have that chemistry. Some of them had to play together last year against Michigan State. They've all spent time together in fall camp when they've had to mix and match at points. So, yes, there is certainly that chemistry you want to build with a 5-person offensive line, but there's also the talent that they have, right? I mean, you just named 6-7 guys who most Big Ten schools are starting. So when you have that, you want to figure out ways to get guys in. I think they're going to continue to do that as they look for the best 5, but I think it's going to come down to that group you mentioned with Thayer Munford playing that left guard, Nicholas Petit-Frere at left tackle. Petit-Frere said today that he thinks Thayer Munford plays that left guard position just like he played left tackle. He called him the best offensive lineman in America because of the ways he can play both positions. DeJuan Jones is a beast. And one thing that I don't think gets talked about enough, and this was brought up a couple times, is because of that basketball background he has, how well he can move. He's not just a big guy. You usually see those big guys on the offensive line, but there's ways to exploit their size. And DeJuan Jones just doesn't have that. Now, he doesn't have a ton of experience yet playing, so he may get exploited a little bit here and there when he goes up against really good defensive ends, but this kid's a very talented player. They're very excited about him. You mentioned Paris Johnson. You mentioned Harry Miller, who I think has taken another step after some struggles at center in the game he started there last year. I think that's your best group right there, and I think that's what you're going to see most of the time, but I do think they'll get some of those other guys in there.
I'm also very intrigued about linebacker. We know one starting linebacker, that would be Taraja Mitchell, and you can see why his teammates love him so much. He's one of the guys we talked to today, as we mentioned previously, and he's just, I don't know, you can just tell there's something special about him, and he's waited his turn, didn't transfer. He's entering his 4th year. I mean, we still think of him as a young guy, and for him to be a captain, has never started a game before. This will be his first start Thursday night. He talked about that a little bit. So spitballing here after that, I think probably Cody Simon is going to be a starter. Maybe Tommy Eichenberg. Those are two guys I'm hearing a lot of good things about. Cody Simon, Tommy Eichenberg. Dallas Gant's probably going to be in there. They're going to mix him in there. And when they go with the Bull at the hybrid, outside linebacker safety, that's going to be Craig Young's going to be the starter there with Ronnie Hickman as his backup most likely. But when they go with 3 linebackers, Patrick, Taraja Mitchell, are we thinking Cody Simon and Tommy Eichenberg? What do you think? And Dallas Gant, who's going to be the other 2 starting linebackers?
Yeah, I think that is another position group that could change a lot throughout the year. And not only because of guys getting healthy, a lot of guys have been dinged up in camp, but just based on what you see out there, what the offense is doing. You mentioned the hybrid position. We'll see that at points, probably not against Minnesota because they're a run-first team. But I think you can kind of pick and choose because there's guys that have a lot of talent. They can do some different things. So, I think all those names that you just mentioned are guys that are going to see a lot of playing time this year. It's just a matter of what works best. Taraja Mitchell being named the captain, very clear what they think of him. And we just saw that talking to him. But, yeah, I think, in some situations when you don't have 3 starters or whatnot, that's not a good thing. I think in this is a very good thing because you can kind of pick and choose who you want in for different situations, who you want to start certain games, keep the other offense guessing a little bit too because, like I said, these guys are pretty diverse.
Let's go back to anything Ryan Day said that I might have skipped over. I know you talked a lot about Minnesota and how they're veteran and physical, and he's got a lot of respect for them. I mean, they were they were a top 10 team 2 years ago. You can focus on last year, and he mentioned how they have a lot of guys back from that team, including quarterback Tanner Morgan. And PJ Fleck's done a good job with that program. And PJ Fleck was 13-1 his final year at Western Michigan. I know he might be a polarizing figure. The man can coach. And I think Minnesota's going to be a good team this year. Maybe your thoughts on what Ryan Day had to say about the matchup this Thursday and anything else maybe that caught your eye.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things that I took away from this is the focus on going 1-0. And that's something we hear about a lot, no matter who the Buckeyes are playing. But this is a Big Ten game. You just mentioned a team 2 years ago that was a top 10 team. I think that they realize, look, we can't go out there and screw around. This isn't a normal conference or a normal season opener. You're going on the road. You haven't played in front of a packed stadium in well over a year. I mean, there's a lot of things here that they have to, make sure the players are focused on. Now, when it comes down to it, I think they're going to be fine. I think talent outweighs in the Buckeyes' favor. But I did think that was this point Ryan Day really drove home today was, you can't lose here at Ohio State. He understands that. He's told us that before. You have to start this season 1-0. Those are the expectations, regardless of the situation. So that was something I thought that really got driven home. The quarterbacks. I think they're very excited about what C.J. Stroud, Ryan Day said, we're going to go out there. There's a lot of things we don't know. We're going to learn. We're going to make mistakes. Obviously, you hope to win the game, but that's one of the things. You grow from that, and I think C.J. Stroud is going to be a benefactor of that as the season goes on. But yeah, I think other than that, they're ready to go. I asked him about, is this team game ready? And he said, we're ready to play the game. So I think they're jacked up. I know a lot of fans are jacked up. I've seen a lot of comments both here and on social media how excited people are. So, we're 3 days away now?
I'm jacked up. I know that much. I'm jacked up. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Bucknuts Live. We really appreciate it. For Patrick Murphy, I'm Dave Biddle. Keep it locked to Bucknuts on 24/7 Sports. We'll have full coverage of everything Ryan Day had to say today and the 4 players we got a chance to speak with. And we'll have full coverage throughout the week on the Buckeyes, recruiting, and everything else. Thanks again for joining us. Take care, everybody.